When I was at school, we were given beautiful powder paint in little cones of colour in bun tins to paint with. We loved the colour and we were told not to spill it. When we added our brushes and water and painted it on our paper, it seemed to die. The sculptor Anish Kapoor, perhaps influenced by the piles of dye you see for sale in the markets of the East, has noticed this powder paint, this pigment, as sculpture and has left it as such. He has added to it a vast range of sculptural form. This sculpture is called, As If to Celebrate, I Discovered a Mountain Blooming with Red Flowers. Anish Kapoor is the master of a wide range of unexpected and sensual shapes and textures.
Very simple and obvious question is, what is it? And in response to that, one isn't saying it is A, then one has an answer and that's the end of that. Hopefully the things remain puzzling for long enough for one to really wonder what they are and what sort of relationship with the world they have. In a sense, it remains elusive. It wasn't perhaps till after I left art school that I began to feel what was really important was things that came out of growing up in India. It's a vital link. It's also probably vital to me to be away from it. In a certain way, much of what I do is about things partially revealed, things hidden. Maybe this notion of being away is a way of having something partially hidden in that sense. I think one of the things that I've always been very, very interested in Indian life is the way that ordinary people have some kind of relationship with a particular shrine or a particular temple or whatever. And mostly they're very simple places where there is actually just a stone or one image. And yet the reverence with which they look upon these places is unbelievable. The sculpture happens in a time before the world is created, when Brahma and Vishnu are arguing about which of them is the supreme deity. And out of this void, because nothing is created yet, there arises this linga, phallus of light. And neither Vishnu nor Brahma can understand what this phenomena is. So Brahma takes his form as the gander to fly up and see if he can find the end of it. And Vishnu takes his form as the boar and dives down to see if he can find the bottom of it. All of a sudden, the linga bursts open and Shiva manifests himself as the supreme deity. that the mythological event represented, to my mind, isn't represented. It's actually taking place. The stone is growing. It's expanding upwards and downwards. If one could speak of it in terms of pictorial imagery, it's much more like a motion picture than it is like a painting. So it's that notion of an event taking place which is, for me, very important about this piece of sculpture. And it connects then with one piece, I would say, of modern art. I'm thinking of Brancusi's Endless Column, which stands and extends out of the earth into the sky and down into the earth again, displaying the same kind of phenomena, which carries over into my work. The story or the event that takes place isn't narrative, but is actually happening. Here, it seems to be, in a certain sense, phenomenological. Earth and stone and sexuality. So these are the stuff of living. I feel it's very important that work should, for me, in my own private way, function such that it has a very strong relationship with my inner life, with what's going on inside me, and this whole thing about hands and the physicalness of making this thing, and the fact that it's wax and it's hot, and it has this kind of bodiness which seemed clear. There's a traditional notion of sculpture, especially in Britain, which is very formally concerned with the way that one part of a sculpture relates to another part of sculpture formally. I don't find that interesting. I see myself as an artist, and some things happen three-dimensionally and other things happen two-dimensionally, but the edges blur. Try to be, in some shamanistic way, a medium to somehow reach, and there are some things that do it and some things that don't. I made the work in my studio out of blocks of polystyrene, which somehow I was thinking of stone, very definitely, but I didn't want to be making models. I found a way of making polystyrene, in a sense, do what stone does. It has this kind of granular consistency. It carves in a very similar way too. So I made some forms, ordered the stone. I knew what size it would have to be. And with the stonemasons, we cut the stone down to size. The difficulty then, once the stone's cut down to size, is how to not interpret something that's been made already, but how to experience it again. It's a difficult thing to do, I think. And I think I had to do it because of the scale of the work, really. If one was making something much smaller, then it's possible to just make it in stone immediately. It's good to have one or two outside views that one knows are going to be critical, sometimes at the right moment, often at the wrong moment. One work here. And then I was thinking 1, 2 works there. We'll see. Yeah? And
look, imagine it here. It'll come out down there, out to about there. You've got all that space there.
Well, I think it's about here. In making the show, I've been conscious of the space that it's going to go into. although I think and I hope that the work defines its own space, the scale of this space is very important. So I have a picture in my head, I think, vaguely, which will change. I think, in a sense, it's rather like making a work, making a show. The way the show hangs together is not dissimilar from the way a work hangs together. You have this doorway here, through which almost the whole show is seen in one view. Now, that's a little problematic, because I would like the show to be an experience through which one wanders, and somehow got to use that and not let it be a disadvantage. This show happened, I didn't make a show. I think what I did was make a series of works over quite a long period of time that came together as a show. So in a sense, as the works were discoveries for me, so the show was a discovery. Light is very important to the way the sculptures are seen, and I wanted to control it. Rodin, when he showed his sculptures to people, would often put all the lights out and light them with a candle. This is a void lump of earth, and in the shape of the whole, there's obvious references to fecundity and a mother and the earth as a place of origin. Well, I was looking for a specific color of earth because it matters. But it's very hard to find good, clean earth in London. So I eventually bought it from the garden centre. I always thought I was going to be an engineer. Well, I was at college for 6 months or so, and I just knew it was not not for me. I then lived on a kibbutz in Israel for a couple of years and had a little studio. I'm very involved with, and have been for a long time, with haiku poetry. Now, there's a particular poem by Basho, which goes something like this. Breaking the silence of an ancient pond, a frog jumped into water, a deep resonance. At first, this poem is very casual. It describes the world in a few short lines, and it does very little. I think there, in a sense, is a relationship with material. It is stuff of the world, in a sense, quite ordinary. But the ancient pond is a reference for the mind. Frog jumping into water is a way of speaking of an awakening. So by describing the world, what Basho's doing is also arriving at a symbolic level on which things function, which is quite other. So it suddenly takes a shift. It's suddenly not a description of the world. I'd like the show to have a deep sound. That's all I want, in a sense. You know, just a kind of quietness. I'd like it to be as hermetic as possible. Perhaps that is religious. I think it can be that kind of experience, so I'm going to try and make it that kind of experience. I'm, at the moment, not too concerned about what anybody else thinks. Barnett Newman used to say that criticism to the artist is what ornithology is to the birds, which I think is great. If only one could be that strong. I think that's one of the battles of a lifetime.